What is going on, everybody? This is Jackson Voles from JD Sports Zone, and today I have a very special guest. And today we're also previewing Penn State football ahead of the new era season. But my special guest, again, you may have seen him previously on here, and you may know him for his song Trace McSorley, Matt Fryler. Matt, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this. And how's your day going, man?
Jackson, great to be on yet again. A couple Pennsylvania kids chopping it up. I think you're from there, right? Is what you originally told me. So,
Yes, sir.
uh, yeah. So, no, great to be on. And as I was kind of telling you before the interview, season's going to be here before we know it. So, don't think, hey, we're still, 5 months out. Why are these guys talking Penn State? Like it never stops. There's a lot of things to talk about, especially when you got a brand new coach, brand new team, brand new culture. It's exciting times at Penn State. A little scary, but it's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Penn State fan. My dad is from Pennsylvania, but I'm originally from Illinois, and
Okay.
there was no way I was gonna settle being an Illinois or Northwestern fan.
Right.
I'm good with the Penn State side of things, and a lot of teams have shifted around some things when it comes to the quarterback and systems in the Big Ten, and you saw Indiana win the whole thing last season. So I want to start off with this. The last time we discussed about Penn State was via DM messages, and I know you said you wanted Pat Fitzgerald originally at the head coach position, but Penn State went ahead and hired Matt Campbell, and you've been a big Penn State fan for a long time. Went to Penn State. You were there during the James Franklin era. How big do you think this culture shift is going to be for Penn State football with a brand new era in Matt Campbell and Rocco Becht?
Yeah. Oh man, a lot to unpack there. I think at the point where Penn State was in their infamous coaching search, which will now go down forever as some of the most toxic, whatever it was, 55 or 60 days that you can imagine from our fan base. A lot of good fans that kind of let me down during that whole thing. And then Pat Kraft comes back and pulls a Houdini, pulls a rabbit out of his hat, and gets Matt Campbell. Um, Originally, I was indifferent. I had my two guys, and that was Pat Fitzgerald. And when it became evident that wasn't going to happen, I wanted my Cole region guy, Bob Chesney. Um, I don't think either of those two were ever in the real conversation for the tier of guys that they were going for. I think the reason I was originally indifferent on Campbell is because I hate the Big 12.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm a Big 10 guy. And I've seen now Mike Yurcich, who came from Oklahoma State as an offensive coordinator, get fired. I've seen Andy Kotelnicki, who came from Kansas as an offensive coordinator, stink it up last year.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I was a little skeptical about hiring a Big 12 coach. But as time has gone on, it's hard not to love everything that Coach Campbell's saying.
Hmm.
It's hard not to love the track record of doing more with less.
Hmm.
And I just feel like he's so much different than Coach Franklin when it comes to the reliance on coordinators that plagued James Franklin. I feel like Matt Campbell kind of brought his coordinators up with him. And like a guy like Taylor Mauser, who started at the very bottom and is now his offensive coordinator. So I think this is going to be a culture shift. And, originally we were talking about Kalani Sitake, that they were on the goal line. That would have been the real culture shift. But I think Matt Campbell is the better answer than Sitake because it's going to ingrain a little bit better. His grandparents are from Carmichael's, Pennsylvania. He's a Midwest guy, born in Ohio. Um, spent a lot of time, in that area between kind of Pittsburgh and Morgantown, out in Western PA. So I think it's a better fit than Sataki would have been. So for as upset as people were that the crumble cookie swooped in and paid Sataki to keep him away. I think we got the right guy. I just hope our fans are patient. It's not going to happen overnight. And I'm a firm believer that Matt Campbell deserves the same amount of time that James Franklin got to really judge whether this was the right hire or not. And I think he is committed for the long term. He doesn't seem like a guy that really ever wanted to leave Iowa State, right? There was only a handful of jobs I think that he probably would have taken, including Penn State. So yeah, I think it's a little bit better of a hire than you would have expected to have 58 or whatever days in your head coaching search.
Hmm. I mean, I completely agree with that. And you talk about, more with less, especially leading around the Big 12. Now, I had another guy in the playbook. The interview you were originally on, he's not a Big 12 fan at all. Actually, he's just a Georgia Tech fan. So he's more an ACC bias side of things, but he hates the Big 12. But I mean, you talk about Sataki being really close from a BYU departure over there, had a phenomenal season. You're bringing Matt Campbell, again, doing more with less in the Big 12 with Iowa State. That kind of leads to my next question because you see, with James Franklin, while he was at Penn State, he was a run first guy, a fast, heavy tempo kind of guy with play action passes, in that whole offensive schematic side of things. So I would love to ask you this: what can you expect from, again, the schematic side of things with Matt Campbell being implemented into this Penn State offense? Again, bringing in some of his guys like Rocco Beck, Ben Brahmer, Chase Soul, and the guys he brought over from Iowa State.
Yeah, a lot of new names and faces to learn, obviously, a ton of roster turnover, which is expected. Happy to have Rocco. I think that'll be huge to have a guy coming in with one last shot. Campbell gets his guy, and I don't think there's any other quarterback that you could have put in that position here that, if you want to win games and you want to have a shot at the playoff. And, again, this is going to be very largely a team, I think, that is the underdog that doesn't really have too many expectations because there is so many question marks. But, there's a lot of talk about the schedule setting up nicely. I think from a schematic standpoint, you know, as we sit here at the end of April without really knowing too much about how Matt Campbell and Taylor Mauser's offense is going to fit on game day. One thing I can say is it cannot get worse, Jackson, than James Franklin's game management. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
James Franklin, a coach that I'm very grateful for. It was an era that lasted throughout my entire 20s, brought me some great memories in college, and I'll forever be grateful for Coach Franklin for that. However, it was very evident at the end that the way that he approaches running a college football program overall, because he is a great recruiter, overall does not work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hilarious to me that Virginia Tech thinks that they're going to get anything different with James Franklin than they got with Brent Pry, because Brent Pry learned how to coach from James Franklin and took
Mm-hmm.
everything he learned from James Franklin and applied it at Virginia Tech, and it wasn't good enough. But Campbell seems to me like a guy who's going to be more involved in game planning, and not the type of involved in game planning where you're just going over your coordinator's head and telling them what to do, but that you already have a staff with continuity. A lot of guys coming over, the offensive line coach, the OC, the general manager. And I think it's going to be, there's that sense of continuity on game day. And I do think that as an X's and O's coach, Matt Campbell's going to be a lot better off. I mean, you just got so sick of watching James Franklin in certain situations. I always go back to the Oregon game. You got a 4th and 2 on the +37. You got all the momentum in the world, and you punt. There's just multiple examples of things that happened over the time of him being there where the team was just not ready to play, and they would let one loss turn into two. Um, so I think Campbell is a better game day coach. And I also think that he understands more about, hey, you can be a player's coach, but there's also a time to be hard on your guys.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes Franklin lost that, and just became an ultimate players coach and really didn't have, the team didn't have the discipline towards the end that they should have had. So I think Campbell is kind of old school
Hmm.
in that sense, kind of a blue collar type of coach, and we'll see because actions ultimately speak louder than words. So I just hope that our fan base is patient enough to give him a shot, and let's not judge this thing if we go 7-5 this year. Um, this is a long term move, and I'm okay with a couple mediocre years if it means long term success.
I'm very excited to see how, this Penn State and new offense plays out. Because you look at James Franklin's regular season resume. I mean, it's 9, 10 win seasons, leads you to a bowl game, ends up, losing in this new 12 team playoff format with, Drew Aller, guys like them, Tyler Warren. And I want to ask you this because it comes to a competitive aspect of things in this Big Ten. You see Oregon at really the top of their game with Dante Moore coming back for another year in Oregon. Michigan has a new head coach, but Bryce Underwood, we saw a little, signs of sparks towards the end of the season with him. Ohio State, Julian Sayin still returning and bringing in guys back again. And Indiana, I know they're losing a lot of their weapons to the draft, and you still bring in a guy like Josh Hoover, but they return all their defensive side of things. I want to ask you this: how do you think Penn State matches up to, I say, quote unquote, the big dogs in the Big Ten when it comes to regular season and bowl game time?
Yeah, the Big Ten has truly become the dominant conference in college football. We know that three straight national championships, and here they get one in basketball too. Unbelievable how much success the Big Ten's been able to have recently and kind of taking the reins from the SEC. Yeah, it's nice to not have Indiana, Ohio State, or Oregon on the schedule. Something that a lot of Penn State fans will not be used to. We don't have to play Ohio State this year. Man, that'll be the first time in, shoot, probably 12, 13 years from what I can remember, and
Hmm.
it might even be longer than that. And a lot of those years having to play Ohio State and Michigan in the same year when you were in the Big Ten East. So yeah, as far as like, I don't think it matters as much anymore, like making the conference championship game. I think there's an argument that sometimes you'd almost rather be an at large. You
Hmm.
know, if Penn State didn't make the conference title game in that 24 season and didn't have to go fight a battle against Oregon where Abdul Carter got hurt and a lot of players were banged up trying to win that game at the end, put it all on the line, would they have been more rested to take on a Notre Dame who didn't have to play in their conference championship? Yeah, I think you have to win 10 games, right? I don't think we've seen a three-loss team get it. We might have this year. There might have been one, but got to win 10 games. And, a lot of people are saying that Penn State might be favored in 10 games. I think the schedule sets up nicely. I've kind of joked about it and said we have 9 home games this year because you're going to Temple and to Maryland,
Hmm.
which both will be Nittany Lion dominant crowds. I mean, that Temple could be 80-20 at Maryland. It could be 70-30. So playing a lot of games close to home. And you don't have those big three on the schedule. So yeah, I mean, again, going in with no expectations because I want this process to play out, and I trust Matt Campbell will build it. But man, it's yeah. I mean, you talk about Indiana losing a lot to the draft, Ohio State as well. I think
Hmm.
looking at a lot of NFL mock drafts, they could have as many as 3 or 4 top 10 picks. So, but they always reload. So a lot of these teams will reload. I think the biggest point to make there, Jackson, is like the shift in how Penn State came into 2025 ranked number 2 in the country, and everybody had expectations of a national title solely based on the amount of returning production. And I think what we get lost in that and we overreact to returning production. I think when Oregon comes into Beaver Stadium and has 18 new starters out of 22, most of them being transfers, it didn't matter
Hmm.
that those guys weren't Oregon Ducks the year before. All that mattered is that they had experience in college, and Penn State had guys that were there for 3 or 4 years, and they got outplayed that night. So don't tell me. I don't want to hear from anybody that Iowa State players can't come in here. And I think the Iowa State guys will have a chip on their shoulder where they're like, here's our shot. We didn't get recruited in Big Ten schools. The best offer that we got was Iowa State, and now we have a chance to prove that we can, go and compete with the big boys. So Yeah, I expect this team to be in the mix. I just, I don't really care as much from a wins and losses perspective. I just want to see how they look on the field. And I want to see Campbell plant the seed in year one from a culture perspective of like, hey, this team was gritty. They hung around in games. And like I said, Jackson, Penn State fans might crucify me for this. I'm okay if we go 7-5 this year. I know that would sound like a disaster of a season, but I'm just tired of this culture where it's like in college football in general, where it's like natty or bust. I mean, what I and a lot of Penn State fans went through last year was probably the worst time I've ever felt as a sports fan in my life. Like that, Penn State hasn't been, outside of all the off-field stuff that goes on the field. I never felt like that defeated to have that team with that kind of expectations do that poorly. And then you look back and you're like, we have nobody but ourselves to blame. And when James Franklin sat up there at Big Ten Media Days before the 25 season and said, this is the best team we've ever had, this is the best coaching staff we've ever had, he set this team up for failure.
Hmm.
You'd never hear Nick Saban or any other successful coaches buy into the rat poison like
Hmm.
Franklin did. So a lot of people, Vatech fans coming back at me saying you're not going to know what you got till it's gone. It's funny to me how the narrative shifted so much from Franklin being this big game James and a guy who can't win the big one to all of a sudden, oh, Penn State doesn't know what they just lost. Like
Hmm.
what happened? And Franklin will go on these interviews with Josh Payton, whoever, and talk about, oh, I didn't need a job. Like I had the ball in my court with all these different schools that were approaching me. It's like, well, then why'd you go on College Game Day a week after and talk about, how you wanted to stay in the profession and how you wanted to be a head coach forever, how you didn't have any hobbies. Like it's
Hmm.
just constantly feeding people what they want to hear. And I look forward to Matt Campbell, and he seems a little more honest, less like a used car salesman. So
I do actually want to retract back to what you said earlier in the statement because you talk about wins and losses in conference, and you see outside of the BCS era, a lot of people have a debate about this. This has definitely been a debate around the sports station here, and I know I have a couple friends who are Notre Dame fans, and they get pissed about this when I ask them this question. So I want to ask you: we talk about in conference game. We saw a Duke team go 8-5, win the ACC. Do you think, and I don't know if you have like a personal opinion on this, when it comes to teams playing an extra game, for example, like championship games, do you think they should get punished for that in this new, obviously 12 team format being implemented into different seedings there?
yeah, there's a couple different ways to look at that. In a perfect world, I think we eliminate the conference championship game, but in reality, that will never happen because the conferences are always going to protect that weekend for their revenue. Money runs college football, and that you'll never ever get the conferences. Much like the states have power over the federal government in the United States, the conferences have power over the college football playoff
Mhm.
committee when it comes to this. So they're never going to get rid of it. And is that going to force coaches' hand to start sitting guys in championship games? Because like I said, we saw Abdul Carter get hurt, and some other guys get banged up. Penn State went against Oregon 2 years ago, so yeah, I don't know if who's going to be the first coach. Now, I would think that you think about guys like Kurt Signetti and some of those old school coaches. They don't discuss these things the same way the media does. They're thinking about how important Big Ten championships are to them, and they're I don't know if there are any coaches out there that would be willing to like kind of forfeit the championship game or not playing it to secure their spot in the playoff. But it is an interesting conversation. I think in a perfect world, we would get rid of them. Certainly, to answer your question, yeah, if you make the conference championship game, you should not be punished for losing. I can't see a scenario where, and I don't think they really have, from what I remember, punished anybody for losing a conference championship game. And I just hate these rules with, it's great to see Notre Dame get left out, but I hate to see the rule where like now they're guaranteed in if they make the top 12 due to some clause. It's like constantly with the special treatment of Notre Dame. And it's so funny that Miami made the run they did, right? Because of all the shit that Notre Dame fans talked and said about, Miami getting in. Miami didn't deserve to get in. Well, look what Miami did. So, yeah, maybe the G5s need to be limited to one instead of two. This year ended up being a real weird kind of circumstance with both JMU and Tulane.
Yeah.
And I think there should be room for one of them, maybe not two. Um, But yeah, it's probably going to continue to expand. Unfortunately, I don't think we ever had to go past six. If in a perfect world we'd have six, and then we'd still have some major bowl games to play. Outside of that, I think if you do have 12, the one reform that you have to make, like starting now, like get it in place for 27, is you got to put games on campus for those teams that get bye weeks. I mean, this is crazy what's going on. We saw the first 12 team playoff, Jackson. Those first four teams that got byes all lost.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, Indiana took care of business, but what? I mean, you think about back to this year's playoff, I believe a few of the teams with a bye week lost, right? Miami played in the first round and then won their second round game.
Hmm.
Trying to think back to the bracket, but yeah, there was a couple of the teams with a bye week that got knocked off. So interesting, right? Like that's something that we need to get those games on campus. Like these teams should not they get a bye week should not be punished for getting the bye week. Like let them play at home, just like the teams in the first round.
I mean, I completely agree, and I just wanted to ask your stance on that because I know I have a lot of, again, my roommate is a Notre Dame fan, and he was upset about the whole Miami thing. And then I have another friend who's a Vanderbilt fan, and you talked about the G5 schools, two G5 schools being implemented in the playoff bracket. He's like, Vanderbilt had a better case than JMU or Tulane and should have been implemented in the 11 or 12 seed, and maybe should have put in Duke as a 12 seed. And I live in the Georgia area. Everybody is a Georgia fan, and they were so upset to see Alabama being put in that playoff bracket last season. So yeah, I just wanted to ask your opinion on that. And I have like two more final questions very quick for you. And you talked about, a 7-5 record defining success for this new era of Penn State football. I want to talk about the future. Obviously, Rocco Beck's in his final season. You're gonna have Matt Campbell there for a good minute. And honestly, this was a crazy hot take, but I believe that Matt Zollers was going to be the future of Penn State, and he's
Yep.
at Mizzou. So I want to talk to you about the future. What would you define success as within the next couple years of the Matt Campbell era?
Yeah, I think I say it three times now. Our fans need to continue to be patient, the same way they were with Franklin. And he was able to get the job done in year three, but this might even take longer. I think that the obsession with like Signetti and how people think that anybody else can replicate what he did is impossible. Until somebody else comes in and does it, I think Kurt Signetti is just kind of a diamond in the rough when it comes to that's not a formula, right? And he did it with, they had some NIL, but not NIL at the level that some of the other SEC schools had. So, yeah, I just, I don't want to say, oh, that the team's going 7-5 this year. I think I just want to see the product on the field, the foundation of the Campbell era start. And, whatever the wins and losses are, like you could go, this is such a tough conference that you could go 8-4 and have, three or four bad losses, or you could go 9-3 and knock some teams off, or 7-5 and knock some teams off. So, overall record is one thing. I just want to kind of see them game by game. But yeah, long term, I do think, I've said that in order for us to judge this decision on whether Pat Kraft firing James Franklin was the correct move,
Hmm.
I don't think we'll know that answer until 2036. And I'm not saying Campbell's like, if Campbell is like below 500 for a couple years in a row, he might not make it to year 3 or 4.
Hmm.
Right. So I'm not saying that it has to be all 10 years with Campbell. Like if the team in year 2 and 3 and 4 is like just not improving, it might be time to move on. But I'm just talking about the Penn State football program over the next 10 years. And I hope that to be Matt Campbell's team for the next decade. But what I don't want to hear, Jackson, is like people coming out after, Penn State is competitive in the first 2 years, but maybe isn't a top 25 team, and then goes into year three and they're like, all right, this is the year for Campbell. Like this is make or break. Like James Franklin won a Big Ten championship in his third year. Like I just don't think you can do that. I think, you just have to let him get these recruiting classes in, see how he is in the transfer portal too, because Franklin's method of recruiting a guy, developing a guy, and then getting all those guys back to where they were fourth and fifth year players did not work last year. So how is Campbell going to do in the portal? Is he going to be able to hang with the big dogs that are getting these huge portal classes in? But yeah, I think Matt Campbell can win Big Ten and national championships at Penn State. I think he's capable of doing it. I just have to see, over this next 10 years, then I'll be able to answer you if firing James Franklin was the right move. And people are going to act like they can answer that question after this season. People are going to be
Mhm.
like, you see, they should have never fired him. If Vatek goes like 10-2 or 9-3 in the ACC, Penn State goes 6-6 in the Big Ten, it's going to be immediately.
Mhm.
Immediately. See, they made a big mistake.
Yeah.
And all the media that already has that take before the games are even played too, it's like now they're going to use that confirmation bias to confirm that, like, hey, it was the wrong move. We can't judge that decision for a
Mhm.
very long time. So yeah, I hope Matt Campbell's here for the next decade plus. I would love to see that, and I absolutely believe that he can bring Big Ten and national championships to State College. I also believe that we need to get back to a BCS era mindset from a college football fan standpoint, that it is
Mhm.
not national championship or bust. It is not. You talk to any Indiana fan and how amazing of a time that they had because they didn't have those expectations coming into the year. They had some of their best memories probably as, in their lives from, and then you have the flip side of that, right? A Penn State team that it's natty or bust. It's natty or bust from the time you get to May all the way through the season. And it was the worst time we ever had as sports fans going through that. So yeah, don't drink the rat poison. That's all it is. And let's just watch this play out, and let's give this guy a shot because it's not going to happen overnight. If it does, great. We're playing with house money, but I don't think it's going to happen overnight.
I think it's very exciting to see from an outsider perspective, especially from a fan's perspective, having so much bias on the head coach side of things. Because Alabama fans were ready to call for Kalen DeBoer's head within like the first season or two. Not really giving him a true chance because you had Saban there for so long. Dominating the SEC landscape side of things. And I think Big Ten is much more highly competitive than the ACC. I mean, who do you have over there? You have Clemson, who didn't really perform to the highest peak you have over there. I mean, Miami, you have Darian Mensah now over there, transfer from Duke, performing at a high level. So I think so many fans are ready to call for coach's head when they see one thing wrong with the team, especially in regular season record side of things. And I'm excited to see how Penn State performs in the regular season. I mean, you got USC, you got Michigan, you got Wisconsin, who brings over, Colton Joseph. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. Now, Matt, a fun, quick question before we wrap up things. We look at the Heisman candidate race. I know we're 4 months out from week zero of college football. Do you have a way too early Heisman candidate? And then leading into the NFL draft, Fernando Mendoza is the projected number one pick to go to the Raiders, but you saw Kirk Cousins sign that 5-year deal. Do you think that Fernando Mendoza will be the week one starter for the Las Vegas Raiders if he gets drafted there? So, two questions.
Yeah, early Heisman contender, got to be Rocco Becht, right? I think
Mhm.
injuries have kind of held him back, but yeah, why not, right? I mean, we've seen, like, nobody expected Mendoza last year, so um, we'll see if Rocco, yeah, if Rocco can get himself in there. It's hard. I would have to look at the odds board for some of the other guys coming back, but yeah, as far as Mendoza goes, I would expect him to be the week one starter. I think so. I'm just so happy, Jackson, that, like, all I keep thinking about during this whole episode is how Penn State is rid of Jim Knowles. Jim Knowles is the worst thing that ever happened to Penn State football. I cannot believe how poorly that went. That is a decision that got James Franklin fired. And as much as people want to talk about how the writing was on the wall, James Franklin got fired because he hired Jim Knowles. And I can't wait to get rid of that guy. Good luck, Tennessee. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun for you guys to have him as your defensive coordinator. I can't imagine that goes very well.
I mean, I've been hearing that all week. My radio boss is a Tennessee fan, so he's been yapping about the Jim Knowles situation all week. But any future projects coming up? I mean, songs. Go follow Spring Ball Boulevard if you guys haven't
Yeah.
done that already as well, too.
Yeah, yeah. Love spring football. Love the UFL. We do a weekly show on YouTube for that. You can check that out on the Matty Fresh YouTube channel. A lot of former college football stars that a lot of college football fans would recognize. Um, But yeah, I always say like if I get some inspiration, this is the type of team where I think storylines are going to come out of nowhere, stars are going to emerge. Nobody expected Tyler Warren to pop off the way he did coming into 2024, and he ended up being, one of the greatest tight ends in Penn State history and a Heisman candidate. So we'll see who's gonna be the next guy who deserves a song. Obviously, it's big company to keep with McSorley, Barkley, Dotson,
Mhm.
Warren. So you can't just do one for anybody, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that rhyme with Rocco. I think Rocco, and plus his dad is a coach in the UFL. That kind of ties it all together. So, uh, yeah, I think his dad would love that if I did that. I get to talk to his dad in press conferences all the time, and I think he would like that if I made a Rocco song. That might be the one.
Yeah. I mean, I look forward to the Rocco Beck song, and honestly, I was upset when his dad left the Battle Hawks. I've been paying attention to the Battle Hawks for a little bit of a minute, and I saw the Matt Corral and DTR trade. I didn't think that two quarterbacks who I was a big fan of in college football that would lead
Yeah.
to so. But Matt, thank you so much again for your time out of your day to do this, and this will be up within probably the next 10 minutes. So I truly appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jackson. And we are Penn State, baby. Let's go out, leave it out on the field. The Matt Campbell era has begun. We're excited, and we hope Matt Campbell is the one to bring a national championship to Penn State because it's been a long time, baby.